councillors, and welcome to this enthralling workshop on representation. I do apologise for slide 21 in advance. You will, that's the only slide I'm speaking to, and you'll get the full impact of that when we get to slide 21. This workshop will be directed and orchestrated by my colleagues, and very capable colleagues, Brendan Madley here and Tash Port. Tash is the whiz on anything GIS, mapping, data and quantum physics. Terrifying when those are all put together. I'm now going to throw it over to Brendan. Brendan will lead you through the discussion, provide some background as to this process. You'll note that we have brought this process in-house, and I'm quite proud of the fact that this is being managed as a project, given the length and depth and breadth of expertise that we actually have in order to enable the analysis of this, but more importantly, the relevance of it to our local communities. Brendan.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, councillors. Just before I dive into the workshop, just one quick public service announcement with my LTP hat on. I've been asked to pass this along, just to say that elected members, you'll be getting a couple of emails over the next day or two, just discussing availability for the promotional video that we were looking to shoot. That was being discussed previously, I believe, and also for engagement slots, community events and things like that. So just to let you know that that will be coming out. On with the workshop. Does the clicker work? It did work and it is not working. Okay. Off to a good start. So whilst I wait, there we go, perfect. So this is the third workshop that councillors had on the representation review. And the intention of today is to firstly provide an opportunity to recap where we're at and where we're going. Secondly, we want to go on undertake a communities of interest exercise with you. Thirdly, we want to discuss 4 boundary options based on guidance from previous workshops, and we'll discuss that at the time. Fourthly, we aim to do an exercise with you in terms of the number of elected members and how that might influence particular boundaries, representation, effective representation, and the like. And then finally, looking to bring that all together. So just an idea of where we're going over the next hour to hour and a half or so. There's certainly a little bit of information that we need to impart, but the majority of this will be available for discussion, and that's the key thing that we aim to be able to facilitate. So in terms of a bit of a recap, legislatively, council is required to undertake a representation review at least every 6 years, and we are due because the last one was undertaken in 2018. The purpose of the representation review, and this is what everything comes back to, is to facilitate fair and effective representation for individuals and communities. So that is what we are reflecting on, and that is what we are working to achieve. The Local Government Commission provides some focusing questions for councils when undertaking this exercise, and I won't read through all of them, but effectively they're asking questions such as, how might our arrangements provide for better, fair and effective representation? What might have changed in our communities that we need to update our representation arrangements to reflect? And are our current arrangements achieving the sorts of outcomes that you as elected members on behalf of your community want them to achieve? And there's effectively a bit of a process for how those questions might be worked through. Firstly, we figure out what our communities of interest are. Secondly, we figure out how to best represent them effectively, and that's through things such as the number of elected members, whether we have community boards, whether there's an at-large or ward system. And then finally, figure out how to ensure that they're fairly reflected or represented relative to each other. As we go through the process, there are a number of parameters that we are legislatively required to adhere to. So for example, if we have wards, as we currently do, within our district, we can't just draw the lines wherever we want. they are required to adhere to the mesh block boundaries that are set by Statistics New Zealand. Now, those are very granular, so we can draw lines in quite a bespoke way, but to be clear, they have to align with mesh blocks so that they align with the way that Stats NZ reports census data and the like. We are using the latest population estimates from Statistics New Zealand. In the last few months, we've had the 2023 estimated ones be released. So that's an update from the 2022 ones that were being used for last year's workshops. We did go away, see if we could get that census data earlier, which is due to be released in May. The answer, no. So we are using the latest data that's available. And finally, noting that we are, as a council, required to adhere to various legislative timeframes in order to get everything done before next year's local elections. For example, the initial proposal and public notice need to be made by the 8th of September this year. We are, timeframe-wise, in a good space. We do have time up our sleeve. And finally, noting that council, at least as far as the initial and final proposal is concerned, is the decision maker. Community boards have been involved to date through a workshop in November and the like, and we aim to update the community boards at the April meeting on how this process is going. Ultimately, once council goes to the community with a final proposal, there may be appeals on that. The Local Government Commission would then make a final ruling. But at this stage, for the initial and final proposal, council is the decision maker. And just noting the key decisions, not for today, because today is a workshop and we're looking for your discussion and guidance, but ultimately, council is required to resolve for both council and the community boards, if they are indeed retained, firstly, the basis of their election. As I said, are you elected via wards or at large, or a combination of the two, because you can have that? What is the total number of elected members, and if there are wards, how is that split? And then the names and boundaries of each wards. If there are community boards, the same applies to them. Bear with me, sorry. As I've alluded to in terms of where we're at in the process, this is the third workshop. Moving forward, at some point, we will have an initial proposal that council resolves that we go to the community on, and we have at least 1 month of public consultation on that. There's a hearing if applicable. Council will then consider those submissions, make a final proposal to the community and notify that. People who submit on the initial proposal have the opportunity to appeal or raise an objection, and in that case, the Local Government Commission will make a determination. Those timeframes on the right-hand column are tentative only and no earlier than based on the timeframes that we're currently adhering to. Just finally in this section, I believe just finally, yes. We're a new team picking this up, seeing as this was previously run externally. We've gone through the previous workshops to try and get an understanding of what your views were previously. And just to allow you to understand what we've heard, and noting that some of this is potentially contested. So we've heard things such as that the Rangitata Huts community might be more closely aligned to Te Muka than Geraldine, and the opposite for Orari. We've heard some general discussion that retaining the wards and community boards ensures a sense of balance and doesn't allow Timaru Township to disproportionately dominate. And we've heard that there's a bit of an appetite to review the number of elected members in total, along with potentially looking at a peri or a community board. Now, to be clear, none of this is decided, set in stone. This is just what we've heard previously and what we're able to discuss today. What we understand we were asked to do, based on the previous workshop, was model a number of scenarios, including an urban v rural split, and consider a fourth ward, model amending the number of elected members, considering the addition of a community board, and check access to census data. So these are some of the tasks that we've gone away, amongst others, and that we aim to present to you today. That's the recap. Before we move to part 2 and considering communities of interest, I'll just pause to see if there are any questions or comments. Clear as mud? Perfect. Thank you. please interrupt me at any point if there are any questions or comments. For this next part, we're sort of going to go shortly offline and do a slight little exercise, and then we'll dive into looking at different boundary options. So part 2, communities of interest. As I mentioned, the communities of interest are effectively the starting point for a representation review. They are the building blocks upon which the representation review is based. And the Local Government Commission provides 3 characteristics of a community of interest. Some of this has previously been mentioned in previous workshops, but some of them haven't, so please bear with me whilst I go through this. The 3 characteristics are firstly perceptual, secondly functional, and thirdly political, and you've got the ability to read their guidance there in terms of what that means. The key thing to note, or 2 key things to note, is firstly they change over time or may change over time, so it is necessary to review and reflect on them whilst doing a representation review. It cannot necessarily be assumed that they are the same. Secondly, to note, and I don't expect you to read all of this, but just to note this from the Local Government Commission, because this appears in almost all of their determinations, noting that the 3 characteristics are interdependent, they do relate to each other, and it's important that elected members go beyond what may intuitively feel is a community of interest, that they tease it out, that they understand what the differences are between distinct communities of interest rather than just necessarily commonalities, if that makes sense. So taking the step to being able to say, this is one distinct community of interest for XYZ reason, and here is another community of interest, and they are different because. That makes sense. I can discuss that further if you want, but I don't think it's possibly necessary. It will make more sense, perhaps, when we do the next exercise, which is, what I'm hoping to do, is give you an opportunity, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, to talk amongst yourselves in groups of 2 or 3, to go through some of these questions that the Local Government Commission has set, and this hasn't been done previously, as I understand it in previous workshops, to allow you to reflect on whether or not the existing communities of interest, being the 3 wards that have been broadly identified, are currently still fit for purpose. Is there something that's missing? Has something changed? Or do you believe that the current fit is correct? There may be animated discussion, there may be crickets, I'm not sure, but we think it's important that you have the opportunity at least to reflect on some of these questions, and I'm appreciative that we've got some group managers here who may, if necessary, be able to provide some supporting information. For example, Paul might be able to speak to population growth and subdivision, or Andrew, if he's here, speak to transport or the like. But what I'll do at this moment, if that's okay, is I'll just pause. I'll give you an opportunity to talk amongst yourselves in groups of 2, 3 through some of those questions, and then we can come back and discuss. Is that okay? Cool. Okay. Thank you.